the desert. I'm on Blycher in a Santa Monica art gallery, joined by Debbie Goldstein from Art Rep DG in an Arizona art representation.
Yes.
So we're collaborating across the country for this, and we'll be visiting artists from New York to California to Hawaii. So it's a trip across America tonight, and I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Right. It's good to see all of you. We haven't seen you guys in a long time.
So we get yeah, it is.
Should we wait for a couple more people? Is it 6 o'clock yet? It's 6:03.
Yeah, it's 6, so we can get slowly started.
Okay.
What we're going to be doing is popping into. We're going to look at our online exhibit, and then pop from that exhibit to see the artworks actually in the artist studios, and learn about a little bit about each of the 6 artists that we are putting on tonight. It's a collaboration between me and Debbie. So Debbie, you picked 3 artists, and I picked 3 artists, right?
Right.
And, yeah.
I just lost. Can you all hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there you are. Okay, there's a picture. Okay, well, those of you who know Art Rep DG know that I talk a lot and I write a lot. So I had written something that I just want to read a little bit of that I think tells you where we are going to be tonight, where I hope we're going to be. And even though the title of our collaboration is From the Ocean to the Desert, it is important to know that the artist's themes are not necessarily the ocean or desert, although most of them are, which is lucky. But their work is more about place and the way that it informs the narrative of their work. And the themes which appeal to me is what I call the semiotics of almost. And what that means is, for example, as an idea, there is the romantic notion, especially when you're here in Arizona or in Potomac or in New York, of walking in the sand, watching the sunset. There is an ancient kind of spiritual quietness of the desert that seems slightly inhospitable with its heat and its light. And yet there is a sense of drama included in both. The lull of the waves, the sheer vastness of the ocean allows one to, I think, naturally.
Oh, excuse us, Debbie.
Well, that's not me.
We got it muted now.
Okay. Everyone's a critic. It allows one, I think, to just naturally contemplate one's size and purpose in the universe. And there is no proof of man's design. And so then you have a hint of action response. And so as an artist, it is a perfect metaphor for the new now of 2020. An artist is always engaged in the theater of opposites. The mind provides the idea, the hand provides the interpretation, the brain is the software, the brush is the hardware. Calm is temporary, drama is inescapable, and both are forever changing. So I think where we've been in the last few months is contemplating place. So I think that the artists that we have represented here tonight have really thought about place, idea, and nature, and have truly arrived at beautiful solutions. And like the waves that are always transforming, and the desert that's always still, we can almost be there. So with that, I think we should start looking at some work.
Beautiful. Um, nicely said, Debbie.
Thank you.
Izzy, do you have the artsy for the show handy?
Yeah, let me just pull that up. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Well, that will go to actually the public space.
Oh, the public page. I'm sorry, I thought I was on that one.
So we're gonna start with Diane Affey. Are you on there, Diane?
Where's Diane?
Can you...
Here I am.
Hey, how's it going? So what did you think? This is your first Zoom, right?
Yes, it is.
Right. What did you what went across your mind when Debbie invited you to this show?
Well, I got really excited and started cleaning my studio. So I have a very small studio. And so I'm always shuffling things around in there and borrowing space from the studio next door to me to put boxes and paintings. And so that's what I started doing. But I'm really so pleased to be participating in this tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure. There's two of your works behind you, and we're going to get into the studio in a little bit to look at them.
Okay.
You might not know it from the one that's to your left, but that's actually an ocean painting because it's glass from the ocean. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I've been painting sea glass for a number of years now. And I have a background as a graphic designer and art director. And so when I started painting and looking for subject matter, I really locked onto this beautiful subject and graphic quality that it has for me, especially since I'm painting it in a macro setting.
Excellent.
I love it.
So do you find it on the beach yourself?
I do. I found it, a lot of it on, out on Long Island, Peconic Bay. And I go to South Carolina quite often. I have family there and I found a lot there. And then people, when they know I'm painting sea glass, they start giving me sea glass and bringing them back from their trips. And so I've got quite a collection now.
Oh, that's great. I think we might just cut straight to the studio if that's all right, Izzy. Is that
That's fine.
Yeah. Do you want to show the video of your studio?
Yeah,
yes.
Let's get cut
yes.
to the studio.
Awesome. All right, let me just share my screen with everyone.
There's AT Diane.
Right. And here we are.
Okay, this is my studio. It's located in Chelsea, New York City in the Arts District. And I paint figuratively and also abstract. At the same time, I bounce back and forth. I usually paint on this left wall that you're looking at now, but now there's paintings hanging. This is from a series of trapeze couples that I am doing. This one is called Time is Waiting in the Wings. And it's really about relationship and it's about trust and risk. And I wanted to capture that moment, that uncomfortable moment in the air when you're counting on another person and what that must feel like. So this second painting is called He Said, She Said. And I'm going to be painting more of this series for sure. I paint in series. And so I have a sea glass series going. This painting on the right is called Lapidus. And all my sea glass paintings are named after various moons of the solar system because I started thinking about how the moons pull on the tides of the ocean and sea glass travels so far and gets formed. This series is really about change and renewal. So I think about how far something has traveled to get to a beach where it's been recovered and then really revered and collected, and people really do connect to the subject matter. The next painting on the right is called Callisto, and it's 30 by 60 inches.
Lovely.
Thank you. And then I created a painting especially for this event tonight. This small sea glass painting is named Ariel, and it's 8 by 10 inches, framed in a gallery style floating frame. So I'm really pleased to be offering that tonight.
We appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And then I wanted to talk about my abstract work. When I started painting abstract during the pandemic, I started by stabbing and mark making and doing really energetic, spirited patterns and collages. So I keep them up on this wall, and while I'm painting my abstracts, if I ever, want to jump off from something, I can look at that wall and incorporate something element of that. This abstract is 16 by 20, and it's called The First Day of School. And I do a lot of layering in my abstract work, and I scratch things, I obliterate things, I sleep on it, I come back, I change it. It's a real process and a journey. And this painting is called The Rapture. And it's really a journey, intuitive and creative, and it's just a mystery. I really do love painting abstract. And then when I arrive at a sense of place, then I'm like, oh, I'm done. Yeah, it's so fun.
And how long have you known Debbie?
Well, how many years? I think I would give us away if I say how many years, but
right. Many.
Our hometown is Akron, Ohio, and we went to high school together.
Right.
And I'm just finishing up this video on my muse, my sea glass muse. That's my dish of sea glass.
It's beautiful.
So thank you for coming to my studio virtually.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I've known Diane, since, we were younger, but I've been watching her work for quite a long time because I think the sea glass is just so special and unique, and it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have a few moments for questions from the audience for Diane. You can unmute yourself and ask a question if you like, just as part of the flow of things.
Diane, I had a question. It's Whitney.
Okay.
You said that you started painting abstract during the pandemic. Did you restart, or have you always painted abstracts?
I started painting abstract only last year, actually. And I had a fit of painting abstracts, and then I kind of got away from it for a while. But when the pandemic hit, I went into my studio and I was just like, my gosh, what's happening? And so it was a natural kind of investigation into abstracts. It's hard to really explain, but I really took to it, and I just did many, many, many paintings over the months of abstract.
Thank you.
Oh,
Great. Okay. I have a couple of questions about the trapeze ones.
Okay.
Do you use models, or how do you get the inspiration from those ones?
I've looked at a lot of pictures of people trapezing. There's a few trapeze schools in New York City, and I've gone by those places and taken some photographs. And I actually was so inspired. I've always been inspired by trapeze. And when I was a child, I asked my father to replace our big swing in the backyard with a trapeze, and he accommodated me. So I grew up on the trapeze actually. And so anyway, it was always in the background for me. I always wanted to paint trapeze.
Great. Yeah, I noticed that the two in the show, there's one where they're actually on the strings, and then one where it just looks like they're floating in the air.
Right.
Is that just a feeling, or is there a symbolism there?
Yes, I wanted the second painting. I didn't want them to have any connection at all. I was exploring that really kind of metaphysical feeling that they would have suspended freely and very full of risk. And so I decided to leave out the wires.
Absolutely.
That's pretty amazing.
Recently, the movie Trapeze came on cable, and I was glued to it.
Oh, great. I haven't heard that one. I'll check it out. Okay, excellent. I forgot to mention at the start of this, it's so that we can have a fresh perspective on each of the artists. I'm leading questions on Debbie's artists, and she's leading questions on my artists. So we get to learn along with the audience, which is fun.
Yeah.
But we all will. Debbie and I will both be jumping in as well. So okay, let's hop on the plane, and we're flying from New York to Malibu, California. We'll be jumping into Gay Summer Rick's studio next.
Oh, out of my order, sorry. Hi, Gay.
Hi, Izzy, if you want to share your screen.
Yes.
I'll pull up your PowerPoint for you.
Okay.
So Debbie, excuse me, Diane, those trapeze artists are amazing. I just love that. And when I think of Chelsea, at the end of, what street is that? Can't remember now, but you can see them out, practicing over the water. It's just amazing. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Om and Debbie, for the invitation to join today.
Pleasure.
I'm sitting here in my temporary studio, and this is what I had to kind of set up when we were in lockdown. And so I gave you a little view during the daytime when the light is better. And so you can see the video of where I'm working. I've got 3 easels set up, and I've got stuff everywhere. It's quite a small space. But my regular studio, which is near LAX, I share with somebody. And so because we needed to do some distancing, it was necessary for me to set this up. So Izzy, if you want to go to the next slide. This is me in my temporary studio, and I wanted to share this because I'm holding knives in my hand. They're palette knives. I paint using palette knives and oil paint. I don't use any brushes. I don't use any toxic solvents. And that's really my commitment to being a good steward of the environment. So commitment to environmentalism. Nothing goes to waste, nothing goes to landfill or the water supply. It's not always easy to paint like a bicycle tire with a little knife, but it's a commitment. So I figured out how to do it. So the paintings that I'm going to share with you, there are 4 paintings that I have done during this, during the lockdown. And just my work in general, I guess what I'd say is that there's this quiet vibration and unexpected beauty in commonplace elements found in the landscape where the city meets the sea. And my work really across the board achieves this in an atmospheric and dreamlike, yet somehow familiar manner. Like you feel like, I've been there, or you are there. So the work that's on the wall, which is behind me also, it really is about, it's a sense of place. It's where I would think that the viewer might want to be while we're in shutdown or anytime. And where I wanted to be. I kept asking myself, where do I want to be right now? I can't be at the beach because the beaches are closed, but I can surely enjoy the beach in my studio. And so that's really what I did, is I created these environments that took me to the beach.
Did you do these, did you do these plein air, or did you just sort of do this in your studio? I mean, did you go to the beach actually to paint?
Well, normally I go to the beach for inspiration, but because the beaches were closed
Right
during lockdown, really I am doing all the work in my studio, and
Wow.
inspiration is coming from sort of a place of where I've been or where I want to be.
Right. Izzy, can you put the poem up?
Yeah.
I found a poem, Gay, that when I was sort of looking at your work, I you know how things happen. I found a poem that I wanted to share with everybody because I thought that it kind of spoke to what artists do and sort of what you think about when you think about what you're doing in nature and all that sort of stuff. So this is a poem that's called Rauschenberg, and I don't know that I necessarily should read it. So maybe you all could read it. But I just thought it was beautiful, particularly the last line.
You're going too fast.
Oh, okay.
I'll go slower.
You couldn't read that? I don't understand. But I was reading some of the reviews of your work, and I thought that whoever said it was really brilliant. Who said that you have a sense of place and a flair for abstraction. You probably remember that.
Yeah.
Because the work is, it's magical. It is really magical. It's like, I really just fell in love with it, and when I think about from the ocean to the desert, I mean, certainly what you're making, is what I conjure up also, like you said, that, this is where you want to be, this is what you think of. But it is also, as I said in the beginning, what you think of when you think of the beach, with the beautiful light and the dappled waves and all that. I just think it's really terrific work. You sort of answered a lot of questions for me. Thank you very much about the palette, the knives that you use. It must be very painstaking to do that. it must take you a long time to do the work.
Yeah, it usually takes a couple of months to make a painting. And so I work on quite a few paintings at a time, as many as maybe 20 at a time if I'm really sort of cranking in multiple studios. And it's because every layer has to dry before the next layer is applied. So a couple of months.
Have you thought about painting anywhere else?
Anywhere else?
Like outside of California, or you know, a more urban thing?
Yes, I do. That's a great question, Debbie. I paint primarily places where the city meets the sea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm from New York originally, and I paint a lot of New York. In the video, the studio video at the very beginning, you can see some of my New York scenes, but they went by really quickly because I didn't want you to see the mess on the floor. So yeah, I paint a lot of New York and Miami, and I've painted Hawaii and Seattle, and so really anywhere that there is an environment, generally an urban environment that meets the sea. That said, I also paint the desert, so it's really anywhere that is atmospheric, where I can capture that atmospheric quality of the environment.
Right. It's great.
For this particular talk that we're doing tonight with this group, it was desert to ocean. So I thought, well, I'll stick with the ocean. And during lockdown, really all I could think about was being at the ocean, because the beaches were all closed and we were not allowed to even park on the highway and look at the ocean. We'd get shooed off the Pacific Coast Highway. So really that's one of the reasons why these are all beach and ocean. Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have anything? Have you shown us anything of your series, The Sand and Sky? Is that what we've looked at? That was a series that when I did the research, I thought was really strong, really beautiful. And so I would tell all of you to go look at her website and look at that series, because for me, it is especially beautiful.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Now, the four works that you see here are part of, I mean, I don't want to call it the COVID series, but they're all done like from March to now. So yeah, and I have, there are four pieces, and I can walk through each one and talk just a little bit about each one if you want to see. Because what you see behind me on the wall is a little bit hard to see with the detail. So I have a larger image, and then I have a detail of each one.
sure.
Okay, so this is called Recharge, and it's a relatively small piece, small for me, 16.5 inches by 31.5 inches. And this is, again, it's really where I wanted to be. I wanted to be by the sea, and I love to watch the sunset, and I like to run on the boardwalk, and so I included elements in this particular painting, things that I love: the volleyball courts, the lifeguard towers, and the sunsets have been amazing with the wildfires. It's just really stunning. The sky's been stunning. If you go to the next slide, Izzy, you'll see a little bit of a detail. This is, oops.
Here we are, sorry.
Detail the stand-up paddle boarders and the volleyball nets and the sunset. To me, it's a very quiet moment at the water. If you go to the next slide.
I wanted to sort of jump in and say that growing up, back east and then living in New York for a number of years and then coming out to California when I did so many years ago, I always had the idea that in California, nature was so predominant and so amazing that it would be really hard for artists to capture it or to compete with it like they do back east, where you try to capture nature. And I think that when I see your paintings, I'm like, bravo, it's not, you're not competing with nature. You've totally, made a painting that is all about nature. Nature doesn't win in this case. And I think that's really, to your credit a lot. I think that's really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. I really want to capture, if you go back one, Izzy, go back one. I want to capture sort of more of an emotion than a specific rendering of a place. It's really, how do you feel when you look at the piece? And so, things aren't, they aren't necessarily photographic, but they're, it's like this, for this particular detail of the larger piece, you can see the lifeguard tower. It's this quiet monolith on the sand. And, in your mind, you may be able to hear the crashing of the waves or feel the vibration. And I take information from nature or from the city or from traffic and translate it into an emotion. Yeah.
Do you have a piece for us for tonight? A special piece? Did we work that out?
You want to? Yes, the fireworks piece. Here's what.
Yeah, so I have, there are 4 paintings total.
Sorry.
This is the last one on the wall. So I was thinking it would be great if we could have fireworks this year. We didn't have fireworks. All the fireworks shows were canceled. And normally it's amazing in Malibu. These people have these private fireworks shows, and it's just, they're stunning over the water. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to create my own fireworks at the studio. So this is a tiny little painting. It's a 6-inch square. And if you go to the next slide, Izzy, you can see a detail of it. You can see the layers. In previous slides that you skipped, Izzy, like if you go to this one, so this one, again, this is wildfire sky. The sunsets are these amazing oranges. Like, you can't believe that is really the color of the sky, but it is. And then if you go to the next slide after this, you can see the detail. So it's layers and layers of paint.
All with the palette knife. That's incredible.
And there's some, I think it's cut off by my screen, but like there's green in that orange and red painting, and it creates this vibration. When you're looking at it, you might not necessarily key in on it, but it's there and it creates a vibration.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I, for one, would like to see one of Diane's sea glass paintings next to yours, one of fireworks. I don't know if I'm the only one, but that sounds pretty good to me. I'll throw it right back to you.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great questions. Any other questions? Are there questions in the chat?
No questions in chat, but we'll
okay.
Yeah, go for it.
How much, excuse me, how much is the one on the far right?
The one with the sunset and the beach, not the tiny little ones, right? Yeah, that one is 3,000.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. And I put if you go down to the chat, I put a link in where you can go to the exhibit and browse at your own leisure as well.
Great.
Great. Any other questions?
Thanks for the poem, Debbie.
Yeah, it just sort of hit me when I read it about your work. So yay. And you know, your influences, it just made me think about Rauschenberg also. So yay, enjoy it. And I can give you a copy if you need one. Okay.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, we're now going to pop over to Whitney Pentello. Whitney, I forget where we're traveling to see you tonight.
Tonight we are in Gilroy, California. So I have my family who logged on tonight. They can smell the garlic. You probably can't. We're the garlic capital of the world. You'll see me on 2 devices just because I worried that we wouldn't have a fail safe if something happened. So you have me on 2 devices.
Okay. Which one?
There you go. You got me.
Okay.
So my studio, like some people, is my home. So when quarantine came, I was lucky that I'm already here. So the room you're in, what I call I call the gallery, is actually our middle daughter's empty nest bedroom. But my real studio where I work, I'll flip you around and tour you really quick. So I really work. I tell people that we have a studio, and I pretend that the studio would be this room here. But I'll be honest with you that more often than not, I tend to work in my living room. If you peek behind the couch, I have a whole studio where I end up working there. So as much as I would like to say that's my home studio, like most artists, I work wherever I have a flat surface. So that's where I am today. But today's gallery is in our spare bedroom, and it's where I get to welcome guests. I'll hang whatever is my most current work. My first love, I've only been painting 20 years, which seems like just barely a few minutes to me. So at 51 years old, I've been painting less than half my life. So I feel like I'm still a student. I was not a taught artist, I'm a self-taught artist. So my family was always involved in theater, and I became a very good mimic because we had to paint sets. So we could do faux painting, things like that. So when I took a break from being a high school English and drama teacher, I dabbled in painting on the side, and it was so fun. And I met so many people, and it really filled a place for me. So I never went back to teaching. But you'll see that drama still is in a lot of my work. So flash forward, here I am. I've painted many years. I sold reverse glass paintings at festivals. So I did old vintage windows with a lot of roosters and wine and gourmet themes. And that was my gig for a long time. But much like Diane, that's why I asked, during quarantine, I had all this extra time to really jump in and work on new things. And I had dabbled in abstracts, but I took a workshop with Louise Fletcher, the painter, not the actress. And she just really sparked a few key things for me in working abstract. And it was a really prolific summer, and I really enjoyed it. So when Debbie reached out, Debbie and I met through a friend of a friend. And so I went to some of her artist panel discussions, and I went to an opening of hers last year. And so we stayed in touch, and she saw some of my more current work and asked if I would participate. So I was excited because for me, this abstract work has really come alive inside me, and it really speaks to a lot of what's been happening in our world and in California especially. So I'm going to turn you around and I'll tour you through a few things.
Great.
Let's see. So when Debbie and I first met, I had started dabbling, and here's just a few of the abstracts that I started in the springtime. These are some fun pieces. I had a solo show this August September. So these were some of the pieces that Debbie saw, and she and I talked, and she said, this is the type of thing I'd like to see. And I really wanted to do something specific for this show. So all of these pieces were made for this show. When she first emailed me, I did this little color study. This is just a little color study on wood. And at the time, the California wildfires had just started. And so even though this is not a piece I have on the roster, this piece really had all the colors in it that were speaking to me, from the fires, just from that really, the rich color that was in the sky. And so that really informed a lot of the work you'll see now. The first piece I started working on here is When the Ocean Dreams of the Desert Sky. And I am not going to lie to you, this started out as a horizontal piece. I had a traditional, ocean, and I was so happy with the ocean, the details, the depth. There's really so much going on here. And as I worked on the sky, the pink wasn't working for me. I didn't like it. It made me unhappy. I set it aside, and I decided to really challenge myself and change it up. So I switched directions, and I took a giant tub of scarlet paint and just splashed it on that side. And I worked it and worked it and worked it. And honestly, this was when the fires were raging, and I felt like it couldn't help but have this scarlet sky. And so I feel like if the ocean could dream, it would dream of this hot burning sky, and it would wonder what it's like. So I feel like they are each dreaming of each other.
Can you do a close up again, but just go in real close and just hold it still so we can see the brush strokes a little bit.
Yes, and
Just
I use
a little closer. Yeah, right there would be great.
Yep.
Just hold still.
It's a little tricky. You want to use.
It's grainy, I think. I think it's because of the graininess. Sorry, my husband, my tech advisor, is helping me here.
Yeah, we all have.
But that allows us to see it a little better, so that's nice.
Yeah. I also put. I have the detail photo of all these on my website, and I put that in the chat just so you can see up close pictures as well.
Oh, perfect.
I use a giant drywall scraper for most of my paintings. So I rarely use a brush for these large pieces. I use a huge, like a trowel. Oh. So this is tremendous. If you could turn off your sound for a second, thanks. This is really fun for me. So while these are in the works, like Gay was saying, I usually have many going at once. So I was also working on this piece here. Now this, thank you. This piece here is called Deeper. And for me, it had a lot of things going. It's not just how deep the ocean is, but for me, it was also how many layers are in here. So I used alcohol inks, and I used acrylic paint, and there is a teeny tiny part. In fact, I put it on my Instagram. There's a little 3-inch spot on this other piece that I loved. And I loved it so much, I wanted to see if I could duplicate it in this large piece. Well, it evolved from there, but this went everything from a pale, sort of a mossy color to a deep dark blue, and then it ended up here. What I wanted was that feel, that there's that hopefulness of feeling the bubbles that are there. There's also the places where you feel that dirty silt that sort of makes its way down, but it's very metallic and sort of mysterious. So I feel like when you're looking at it, you could be under the water, or you might find yourself at eye level with the surface. I feel like there are a lot of places you could identify in this piece. And that one is called Deeper. And then simultaneously, I was working on this piece here. This is called Oceana Playground. And I wanted this to have such a more light, airy feel. And much like when the artists were
contrast.
Yes. For me, it's a personal challenge. I have trouble leaving any of a canvas white. So I tried to keep a lot of activity at the bottom really a lot of depth there. And I just used a lot of water and ink, watered down ink at the top. And so if you're down here at the bottom, the reason I call it a playground is I feel like the ocean, there's so much we don't know that's happening down there. The last finishing touches on this piece, it was so close to done. And I had just purchased this copper ink. Oh, I love inks. And when I sprayed water, they became these playful little jellyfish in my mind. I just feel like they're having a blast down here. And to me, it's a real contrast from the other piece. It's much more light, airy. It's the hopefulness of the ocean. There's no pollution. It just feels like such a safe space. And again, I have detailed photos for all these on my website as well. The last piece, well, second to the last of my large pieces, this is called She Hides in the Sun. And I really wanted that feeling of when you stare at the buttes or mountains in Arizona or even Bryce Canyon, you can see those rich purples and those pinks. And I feel like so often we assume that the desert is bleak and brown. And I feel like the desert has this, it's richer and honestly probably more feminine than we often attribute to the desert. Especially people from California, I don't know if they always appreciate it. So I wanted a lot of these feminine colors, and I even stained the frame is even a blush pink. There's a lot of metallic copper in here, but I will say that we were 1 week from the deadline and Debbie asked me how it's going. And this thing was really making me mad because I wanted it to be soft and pink and airy. And I was really denying the fact that I love the rich, rich, rich purples, pinks. Well, if you look at my original color study, that's what's in my heart. So I finally just hauled out the purples and the coppers and added what needed to be added. And it just felt so much more like me and it felt more like home. So this is called, and I don't know why, but this title just stuck in my head the whole time I was working on it. She Hides in the Sun. And I feel like there's a whole mystic feminine that's inside that. So my last piece, so these four are all canvas. And my last piece, I went back to my roots, my signature medium, which is reverse glass painting. And this piece here is called Arizona Lipstick. Just because, again, I feel like there's that feminine vibe that could be in the desert that people don't always see. And I had been working on a piece I could show you on my studio table that wasn't making me happy. And a friend sent me pictures of the Arizona, it's called the Wave. And it's very much like Antelope Valley, where it's got these incredible striations throughout. And although this comes across as very abstract, I just found this to be such an interesting place that I would love to visit, but it had all these rich golds and purples. So I painted, this is reverse painted on glass in a shadow box. So I paint on the back of the glass, detail first, then I work at the layers. And then instead of painting a sky in the background, that's an abstract, it's a canvas with those rose golds and plums. So there's a canvas behind there that sort of works with that. And that's Arizona Lipstick, because if I could design a gorgeous color for women, I just feel like, and I feel like, again, this has a lot of the feminine, the chalice, the cleft. It just felt like a uniquely feminine piece. And it's sort of abstract. It doesn't have to be the desert for you, but for me it was. Okay. So I am happy to answer questions about any of the pieces or anything else.
Great.
No one has any questions? It's just funny. I don't know if my sister is still on, but my brother, who lives in San Diego, always says there's no color in the desert. And so you have proven that he's wrong, of course, because there is so much color. Those are what the sunsets look like. You know, it's just like when the desert is in bloom, it's like nothing you've ever seen before. And again, I urge everyone to come and look at that because it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible because the desert is so inhospitable. So it's really great. So thank
you. This was I appreciated the challenge. For me, I love setting myself a deadline and a challenge. So this was exciting to get something ready. And it actually inspired me to visit the desert more and research these themes. It was interesting working with the cool and the warm at the same time. It was nice.
Great.
I love the idea of femininity in the desert as well. I think that's a unique approach.
Thank you.
Great. So how far up is, I'm not familiar with where Gilroy is. Is that North
We're right
California?
near San Jose.
Okay.
We're the little farming community right south of San Jose.
Excellent. So we might not need to jump on a plane. We could get on a train to come down.
And and the drive would be beautiful.
And
there's garlic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So now I know where to go.
And if you stay in my spare bedroom, you get all this art will be in your spare bedroom. So there you go.
Excellent. So we're off to back to Los Angeles to Calithia.
Calithia. Where is Calithia?
Hi.
Hi, Calithia. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to find you. Hold on one second.
So
right.
I want to start. I know this seems really corny, but I researched your name, Calithia, because I thought it was such a pretty name. And it seems to me that what I've looked at, that your name expresses so much about you. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a couple of things about your name.
Sure.
Where that you love the outdoors. You love outside activities and the beauty of nature. You long for freedom from restrictions and for outlets for your restless qualities. And you are clever, imaginative, and analytical. And you have an eagerness for knowledge. Now, I don't know where this comes from, but I thought, oh my God, I think this is because what I've looked at in your work, I said, that's all true. I think that's all true. That being said, let's let you talk. Tell me about your process.
Well, I'm a photographer and I have been, since I was a kid, but I would say primarily black and white and mixed media. Behind me, I have a cyanotype, which a lot of people aren't really familiar with the process. It's my way of being in the dark room without being in the caustic chemicals anymore. And I love it because I can be outside in my garden, exposing it. I made a negative, or I brought a negative out so that you guys could see that this is my photograph on transparency paper. And, 20 years ago, I used to use medium format negatives and make really tiny, small ones, but I always envisioned much bigger prints, which back then wasn't really possible. So this is a digital photograph that I make a negative out of. And then I sometimes overlay like elements in Photoshop, or like I'll cut out my image, sort of make like a collage kind of thing. And I really like the idea. I kept envisioning like painting with the cyanotype chemistry. Typically you just make a rectangular shape and you put your rectangular image on there. But I just had this idea of like the water flowing, or energy flowing. I'm into a lot of Eastern philosophies. So I've studied a lot of yoga and Ayurveda, and they talk a lot about like Kundalini. And so yeah, I paint the chemistry on the watercolor paper, and then, I will take those tiny little negatives that I showed you and kind of just place them in the inside the chemistry. And so then that's exposed outside in the sun. I also have a light box that a friend gifted me I can use in the winter. And it's exposed for like 7 to 10 minutes. And once it's washed in water, it becomes permanent. So it's a historical process. I've always loved it. I love blue. I think it's interesting to me now that things are shown so much online. So I think some of the romantic quality of the process gets lost, because sometimes I feel like people are like, why do you have all these blue and white pictures? But yeah, it was created or it was discovered like in the 1800s. So it's a very, to me, it's a very like romantic, tactile, painterly way to create my photography. So I do that, as well as black and white. I love monochrome because I learned, how to develop my own film a long time ago. So I'm really drawn to black and white imagery and the female form and nature. And then a lot of these pieces, I started to add silver paint to. I kept thinking of that. I think it's Carl Sagan, We're Made of Star Stuff, and just the idea of, how I feel when I'm at the beach, and I just feel like I'm really present, and I feel like I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to take any drugs. I don't need to do anything. I just look at the ocean and I just feel really like at peace with myself. So that's
a very meditative way with the process of those ones.
Yeah,
painting.
Yeah, I love color, and I love color clothes, and I love all of the art that I've seen, and I'm like, why don't I paint with more color? But it's just, there's something about the no mind aspect of just like really simple, quiet images that I feel like I'm just expressing my own personal soul journey.
Do you mind if I share I have a little bit of you creating those?
By all means.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So let's see, my screen should be sharing now. Just shows how meditative and detailed that goes into on top of the photography.
So interesting.
Yeah, I really like sharing the process online because it is a personal experience, and we do get to talk about it a little bit when we have open or exhibitions. However, not a lot of artists, when you're like all dressed up with your lipstick and your wine, really get to show that intimacy and the which we're getting now, which is great. I love seeing all these different studios.
Yeah, it's a new way to do it. I interrupted an interesting conversation, though. I'm sorry. I'll let you
one of the things that I noticed in looking at your work was that you were interested sort of in like goddess iconography and like light warriors. That I think that's really great that you have this kind of meditative, quiet work that's really about strong women, and
right.
Which is again, you wouldn't sort of necessarily know that if you're just looking at it online or whatever. I mean, it really is. But can you talk a little bit about the light warriors?
Sure. It's funny, I came up with that title, painting the dots, on the day of the Women's March, I guess in 2017. I didn't go to the one. I don't really like big crowds and everybody crowded around me. So I ended up making a bunch of pieces that I could then gift to the women friends of mine that did go to the march. So like I gave them all a piece of art. And I just was kind of thinking about, all the different people in the world sort of like shining their light together for whatever their causes or their reason, and just coming together. So there's that part of it, the warrior aspect in the lights, but then also the idea of just feeling your own personal power as a woman. I mean, I was raised by a man. My dad raised me alone. So I've been told through like a lot of my different spiritual practices to connect with this goddess and connect with that and like go to these women's circles. And so I've tried all those different things. And I think part of me, you know, showing the goddess or the divine feminine is just my way of honoring like a little bit of that heartbreak and loss, you know, of not having that growing up, but feeling like really empowered now as an adult woman to sort of to share that like sensuality and love for life. And, you know, so.
Well, I also noticed that you grew up in Enid, Oklahoma.
I lived there for the first 6 months of my life.
Okay,
So,
because
yeah.
I wondered what that would be like to be like a female photographer.
No, I don't know anything. I'm a California girl at this point.
Okay.
I've been here since '97,
Oh.
San Diego and LA. Yeah, so.
Okay, all right, that's great. And the goddess, is it just Eastern goddesses, or is it like goddesses from, you know, art history, you know, Hera or whatever?
You know, well, in terms of art history, what I know from art history has to do with just going to museums and galleries. I wasn't able to study in college or school, you know, like art history. I went for photography to community college for a couple of years, but my name, Alethea, means truth in Greek language. And so I think as a kid, I learned that somehow, and I became really fixated on like the Greek goddesses and these strong women. And then I did, like I said, I studied a lot of Vedic history. So I've learned all about these Indian, Vedic deities. So I find them all fascinating. I think it's less about different regions and different cultures and more of just like a personal, like finding your own inner goddess, you know, just connecting with the divine, whether that you connect with Christianity or, you know, you're Hindu or whatever. I'm very interested in shamanic things and Native American cultures, and not necessarily in a way where it's like, this is my dogmatic religion. It's just, I love to see how humanity expresses their love for God in different ways. And I feel like that's really beautiful if we can open our hearts and accept that rather than trying to prove one religion is better than the other.
It would be interesting for you to come to our desert, the Sonoran Desert, or, you know, where the First Nation people have been, and, you know, see what kind of work you can do there. I think it would be really interesting. And I invite you to come.
You know, I'm getting chills because my boyfriend and I keep thinking we need to like go to New Mexico and Arizona on a road trip and just take a break from LA. So
yeah, you should, because your work would definitely, you know, it would be interesting to see what you think about it. So
I will be emailing you for that.
Don't let my husband hear that. No, it's great. Come.
Yeah.
No, the work
Beautiful.
is really so interesting.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yes. So.
Oh, wait. We have a question.
Yes.
It says, it's from my friend Jill Crozen. Oh, it just went away. That I love the piece in the right-hand corner. Can you talk about that?
This one?
Jill, let's see. Can you chat us something, Jill?
Is it this piece?
Yes, that one. Yes, that's really yeah.
Great.
Okay. So this is a friend of mine. Her name's Bethany. She's an actress, and I just wanted to. I love photographing my friends, women. Like not models. I love models, but I love regular people. So this is just her at the beach, and I often use a lot of fabric, the sheer fabric. I titled this piece Maya for two reasons. Maya in Vedic culture means the illusion, the world, basically this is a movie that we're watching and none of it's real. I find that really interesting. So I kind of put her underneath that. It also feels a bit protective. Like there's that idea of like protecting your energy. And then as well as Maya Deren, who is an incredible artist from the 1950s or 60s. I was told at my very first solo show in the back of a photo store when I was like 18 years old that oh, your work looks like Maya Deren. And I was like, who's Maya Deren? So I looked her up and I was like, oh my God, I think like I was her in a past life or whatever. So yeah, this piece is, I think the one that I have available for the special exhibit.
Tonight's offering, yeah.
Tonight's offering, yeah. So it's called Maya, and yeah, it's like haunting to me. Like it's not meant to be scary, but it's just sort of like a protective moment.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Great. Jill, did you have any more questions?
I don't know.
No.
No. Okay. Well, gosh, thanks. I love the process.
That's not true.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jill. Go ahead.
The one right above, the one that's in blue. I don't want to honk the whole time, but
That's all right.
yeah.
So this is another cyanotype. I put it up there to show that while I do a lot of rectangular images, I also like to cut my stuff out and collage with it. Or I've been thinking about just getting like a bespoke oval frame made for this. And again, this is one of my friends. She's begun embarking on a new career from acting to becoming a yoga teacher. And so we went down to the beach and she was in the ocean. And so that's overlaid with some elements of light that I did in Photoshop. And then, like I said, I made the negative, not this one specifically, and then printed this. So the thing with the cyanotypes is that they're essentially like one of a kind. I mean, I could remake it, but sometimes I don't. And then sometimes I do things while it's developing in the sun to kind of give it like a different texture. But I called this one Gaia, which means the world. So, and if this
That
one,
light is just
yeah, if somebody wants to buy
glowing
it,
from.
Aram can put that out somewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We'll take a private inquiry on that one since it's not listed on with the others at the moment. So
But
Jill,
thank you for asking. I'm sorry, who is speaking to me?
Jill.
Jill, okay. Thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you. I love your work. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I do too. I do too. And I would echo what you said, that being able to talk about the process is just so valuable. You know, that's really great. That's the best. So thank you. I love your work too.
Thank you so much.
Home, throw it back to you.
yes. Okay. So now I think we're going to Redlands. So just a car trip to Redlands from Calethio's studio to Michael Cano, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Cano. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Connell. I'm broadcasting from Redlands, California. I was a very long time resident of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County for 55 years. And about 4 years ago, my wife and I decided to come back to Redlands, where she grew up. And I can't tell you how much it's done for my psyche, my soul. Being here in Redlands is so much calmer and so much more sedate and so much more green and so much more filled with nature than LA was. And I always love LA, but I'm so glad to be here. But anyway, we're here to talk about the paintings that I'm exhibiting on this virtual exhibit. And I'm showing 4 paintings in my new series called Retired Aztec Boxers. You can see this one behind me. Is there a JPEG available so you can see it maybe a little clearer without the glare?
Yeah, Izzy, if you could cut to them.
Yeah.
I think Michael's going to do eagle changes, and we can cut to them as he's changing the eagle from the outside.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and forth.
1 minute, I'll pull all of his works up.
Okay, not a problem.
Yeah. Well, we can wait till then. Yeah, let's just talk about it for now, and then we'll get a closer look at it.
Okay.
And I can
not that one.
Scroll
not
through.
That one.
I think. All right. Oh, sorry, I shared the wrong thing. And then I should be able just to scroll to this one.
There you go. Okay, now that's the one that's up on my easel right now. and it's called the 1,000-Yard Stare. And again, the name of the series is Retired Aztec Boxers, and I got that from about 2 years ago. My brother-in-law Jimmy, who also lives here in Redlands, was talking about my work with me. And he said, I really like it when you have more Aztec inspired imagery in your work. So I took it to heart and I said, well, maybe I'll do some. So I did some smaller paintings based on that sort of idea of the Aztec imagery, which has always been inside of me, but now I'm bringing it out. And I started with smaller paintings, and then about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I decided to do larger versions. And as I was doing these paintings, I did the first two, and my same brother-in-law, Jimmy, came over and he said, oh, these guys look like boxers, like retired Aztec boxers. I'm like, that's it. Okay, Jimmy, you've just named the series. So that's what I called it, is the Retired Aztec Boxers series. And what I'm doing with this is exploring both color, shape, form, and also tapping into the tradition and the legacy that I feel inside of me because of my indigenous origins. I've got a lot of Apache blood in me, and you know, I'm Mexican American, but there's a lot of Apache blood in there, and I feel really, really drawn and strongly towards the Aztec style of imagery, the very almost simple but still very complex kind of imagery. And this was like an attempt to capture one of the Aztec masks, one of their jade masks, and put it into a context where it's, again, a retired Aztec boxer. So this is the first one, and I'm going to take this one down and put the second one up. Be right back.
Okay, are you able to close up on that, Izzy? Zoom in on it at all to see some of those brush strokes? Yeah.
Yeah,
brush strokes. It's a big image, but it looks like you use a small brush to create the big image, so it gets that texture. Is that correct?
Yeah, I use a very medium-sized brush to get those particular brush strokes, and then larger ones for, you know, the bigger strokes. But what I like to do, I like to paint wet on wet, so that the painting is continually changing as I'm painting it. And okay, that's not in this one, is it? Okay, hold on. Be right back.
I want to sort of jump in and say that all of the work from Diane and Whitney and Mike are on my website also. And more of Mike's work is under his name on my website. So if you wanted to look at his work and the work that you've seen tonight, it's at Art Rep DG. So you can look at that also, as well as Ohms.
Okay, I forget what this one is called. Can I?
I believe it's Not a Contender.
Right.
Yeah, never a contender. One night when, again, my brother-in-law Jimmy was here for dinner, we were talking about the Retired Aztec Boxers, and they were all just called Retired Aztec Boxer 1, 2, 3, 4. And he said, you should give them some sarcastic names, you know, because they look a little defeated. Even though they're trying to be hopeful, they look a little defeated. So we started coming up with all of these names based on boxing cliches. So this one is called Never Could Have Been a Contender, based on the line from Marlon Brando, could have been a contender. And then we came up with lines like float like a butterfly, drown like a bee. I can't remember some of the other ones, but they're really, really sarcastically funny. Because one thing I really try to do is inject some humor into the work, because it can be very serious looking, but I want to inject humor into it so that it's not so hard to look at. You know, you don't feel like you're isolated or like you're not going to walk away depressed, because I use colors that are a little bit brighter, that are a little bit, they're not as neutral. I like to use saturated color. I really love to use saturated color. So that's where the grim imagery might be there, but I'm also looking to sort of entertain at the same time.
Yeah, there's a nice touch of humor in your work.
Yeah, that's very important to me, because I think sometimes the subject matter can be a little grim, can be a little on the dour side, but I like the humor of it myself. So, okay, that's number 2. So I'm going to put number 3 up.
Also, I think the humor kind of diffuses the slightly menacing quality.
Yeah, there's that. Well, because I tend to use, very, very outsized forms, very kind of almost grotesque forms. And that's not necessarily on purpose. That's just the way things come out.
Sure.
What I do is I go to the internet and on Google Images and look for an interesting image of somebody. I'll look up an old boxer. I'll look up, just somebody off the street, and then I'll base the drawing on that image and then go from there. And this guy is called ears boxed in, which is a cliche of the old in the old boxing profession of having your ears boxed in. And when you really get hit hard, you get hit hard a lot. Then you get your ears boxed in. And these guys, they just disappeared. They're just gone. So also,
I was just gonna say those blue eyes are really piercing out. Like there's some magic to that blue.
that was the point of this one, was to make it the first thing you saw when you walked into a room. If this was on a wall, I want this to be the first thing you saw, because you were so drawn to it by the contrast of the eyes that are just literally lighting up. And that's what I was going for, and I think that's what I achieved. So that's number 3.
Do you mind cutting to the studio view? I'd like to see it larger in situ, if that's all right.
What was that?
Oh, I was just gonna cut from the share screen so I could see it there and get the scale of it.
It's 24 by 30. I don't have a lot of room in here, so I have to limit my paintings to about 24 by 36 at the largest. And this is 24 by 30, a size I feel very comfortable with. I don't like working too big because I don't have the room, but I like this size because it's more than an illustration, and it's not as big as, say it's a 4 by 6 foot painting, which if I could, I would, but I can't, so I don't. So anyway, this is number 3, and I'm going to show you number 4.
Okay. Cut back to the.
Okay. And this guy is called Ruthlessly Toothless. And he hasn't had such an easy time of things. He was never going to make it. He was basically a punching bag, mostly a sparring partner for better boxers. And this is the best he can do. So this is him at probably the end of his career, if you can call it that. And this was one of the latest ones that I did. When I first went into lockdown, I was painting quite a bit every day. And then I switched from that to pen and ink illustrations, which I've done 40 brand new pen and ink illustrations during the last 6 months, 7 months. But I've done also 6 of these, 6 new oil paintings. And this was one of the, I think that was the second to last one that I did. And I really enjoy it. I like the contrast. I like the movements, and what these paintings are images that used to be another painting underneath it that I wasn't happy with. It wasn't relevant. It wasn't any very, very good.
This was brilliant on your part. Oh my God.
So I covered up these images that I had before, and let the texture sort of speak for itself that was underneath. And they became the scars and the lumps and the bumps of the boxers because of the previous imagery. And then I also like to take modeling paste and sort of just paint it onto the surface before I start painting, and then use that as part of the imagery. And so this is Ruthlessly Toothless. This is number 4. And I want to show you guys the moderately priced one that we did, that we're offering just for this exhibit. And that's one of my pen and ink works. If we can switch back to my camera. Oh, hi. So anyway, this is one of the pen and ink drawings that I've done. Right. So that's my moderately priced offer. And lately I've been doing a lot of animal portraits in pen and ink. You want to see some of them?
Sure, we'll have a quick look.
Yeah, they're very quick, very quick. See, there's this guy.
Oh, adorable.
This guy. And this guy.
Oh.
Oops. That guy.
Great.
That guy. Which way is which? There you go.
That way.
And this guy. That guy. That guy. And that guy.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's those are the 4 paintings and the extra one I was going to show. So if there's any question, I'd be happy to answer. Or
Okay, Mike, can you talk a little bit about your life before Redlands?
life before Redlands, or essentially life before Patsy, my wife. Wasn't so easy. It wasn't so easy. I grew up in El Monte, California, kind of a ghetto, and there was a lot of gang activity, a lot of drugs, a lot of crime that I grew up around. I had a flirtation with it. I got out of it very, very quickly, but it leaves marks. That kind of life, it leaves marks. So I grew up a little bit on the I don't want to say thug side, but I knew what thugs were. I knew who they were. So, but it took me a while to get past that. And then once I decided I wanted to be something other than what I saw. And I always had an interest in drawing and illustrations, but mostly, like I said, pen and ink, things like that. And about when I was 24 years old, 1985, I went to an exhibit at the Plaza de la Raza in Los Angeles, or Lincoln Park, California. And it was an exhibit by a painter named David Alfaro Siqueiros, one of the Mexican muralists. And I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It was so incredibly magical, powerful, and just devastating. Devastating. I walked out of there just dizzy. And I said, I'm going to learn how to be a painter. So I went home and started learning how to paint. And it took me quite a while. But, I eventually submitted a portfolio to Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena. And I got accepted back in 1989. And it was a struggle because it's Debbie can tell you that's where I met Debbie. Well, but Debbie can tell you it's more like a military academy than an art school. I mean, if you guys have ever seen the movie Whiplash, it's not unlike that. And it's rough and it's tough, but it really, really taught me how to be disciplined and how to explore and how to question myself and how to just make sure that you are doing the best work you can possibly do. And so I graduated from there in 1992, and I found out, even though I had an illustration degree, that I hated illustration. It was horrible. If anybody here has ever done any illustration for hire, it's just awful. You work for somebody else, they tell you what to do, they keep rejecting your ideas, nothing's good enough, so I just said the heck with it. And in 1994, I decided I was going to go back to oil painting and just do that every single day. And so that's what I did. Was 1994 till now. I painted as much as I possibly can, maybe 300, 400 paintings. And back in 2010, I was working at a music publishing company, and I had an exhibit in East LA, a place called the East Side Love, on First Street near Mariachi Plaza. And I had been corresponding with a Facebook friend by the name of Patsy Farragher, and we had a really nice correspondence going on, but we had never met in person. And that was the first time I met her. She came to that opening of mine, and I just was smitten immediately. And like I said, that was February of 2010. By May of 2010, we moved in together. And a year later, we were married 9 years. So life is much different than it was when it was more filled with angst and uncertainty and desperation and bitterness. Now, no more of that. I don't need that. I don't want that. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good grandfather, and I want to be a good painter. And that's where I am.
That's great.
Beautiful.
That's great.
Okay.
Art is love, and love conquers all, right?
It does. It does. It's not a cliche. It's absolute truth.
Does Patsy want to say anything? I know she's listening.
You have to ask her. She's in the next room. I can't see her.
Patsy, do you want to say anything? No, I guess you can't hear her. Well, it's great, Mike.
Well,
Are
I mean,
there any?
I'm really pleased to be part of your stable, Debbie, because like I said, I've known you since 1989, but haven't seen you since 1992. And then we reconnected on Facebook a few years ago.
Right.
And then you approached me, I believe, earlier this year about maybe wanting
Right.
to be represented by you. And I, of course, said yes, because I knew your reputation. I knew the kind of work that you did, and I knew how good
Thank
you
you.
were at it. So,
Thank
yes,
you.
I'm all in.
Excellent.
Thank you. Let's
Okay.
talk about artists. No. Thanks,
So
Mike. And
now
so,
we do have to get on a plane because we're going all the way from Redlands to Hawaii. And
oh
we're
my
going
goodness, I'm gonna
back
get
in
airsick.
See you, Michael. So yeah, we're going to Tatiana Bottom in Hawaii. And I think it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon there. So
Oh
we're also
my.
going back in time. So
4:28 right now.
4:28. All right.
Fine.
Pre-sunset.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, for getting me out of the COVID bubble. Opposite of everybody else who seems to have been very active creating art, I have not. So the work you're going to be looking at is work that I produced in the early 2000s, and they're part of travel trips that I took. We're going to be looking at some icebergs that I took on a trip to Antarctica, as well as some desert photos that I took in a trip to Namibia, which obviously would not be possible right now. My background is in portrait photography. So in the early 2000s, I took a trip to Antarctica, and I came back with a large body of work, mostly based on icebergs and detailed photos of ice. I did take some photos of penguins. And when I went to Antarctica, one of the people organizing the trip asked everybody, what is it that you want to see the most when you get to Antarctica? And I thought, well, of course, penguins, you know. After being there for a few days, I was like, okay, I'm done with the penguins. And I totally focused on the amazing shapes of the iceberg and how random the shapes are. In the photograph that you see above me, for example, and I didn't realize this when I was doing the photographs. I only realized this when I was putting the work together, that I actually took sort of a portrait approach, taking the photos of the iceberg. So I gave them all kind of a personality, a mood, an attitude. And, you know, the location where these icebergs were taken was an area called Paradise Bay while we were traveling to Antarctica. The captain basically said, hey, everybody, I'm going to tune into radio channel number B. And around 4 or 5 in the morning, I will be waking you guys up if the sky looks good and the icebergs look great. So I just had my alarm put on and I look outside and I was like, wow. But then the captain never called anybody because the sky was gray, there was no sun, and I was on a National Geographic trip where people were expecting those beautiful sunrises and sunsets, and we just got this gray sky with lots of snow. You can see in the photograph the bubbles at the bottom of floating on the water. That is basically leftover snow from the snowstorm that is just floating. They call it oil, but it is not oil. The beauty about these photographs is there's no reference on size. And throughout the trip, I photographed various icebergs, and there is nothing that tells you, there's no human, there's no perspective that can tell you how big or small these pieces are. And I'm going to keep it as a secret because it is a little bit about the magic of the work that you're seeing. It was a very interesting moment for me as in my career as an artist. It was basically a turnaround, and I basically decided to stop shooting portraits and concentrate in taking landscape photography. Um, Both the idea of sense of place was important as well as the sense of time. So with these icebergs, one of the beauty of the pieces that you see is anybody who went back to Antarctica a day later would never see the same iceberg. That was just at that particular place and time. The the bottom part of the iceberg is obviously much bigger than the visible part of the iceberg. When that gets eroded, the iceberg rotates. It is in the rotation that it creates these great shapes that you see in front of you. As far as color manipulation, believe it or not, there was not much. There was basically the only thing that I did was a tiny bit of desaturation to take any additional color that could have been anywhere else, but there were really no other colors out there. So these kind of work really well with my background with portrait photography, because I like black and white photography and black and white portrait photography. So I kind of continue with that theme when I took photos of these icebergs. And the interesting thing about having me be part of the show is not only I've been in love with water and ice, but the deserts have definitely inspired me dramatically. So one of the trips that I did after this Antarctica trip was a trip down to Namibia, which is the southern tip of Africa. And we can probably put some of the desert shapes, which are go backwards. They're black and white, and they're just showing some shapes of sand. Oh, maybe they're not there. But anyway, if you go to the image of me live, you'll see some of them behind me, and I can put them on screen. So right behind me, you have some of the desert shapes, and I'm gonna grab one so I can bring it closer to the camera. When I went to the desert, I was basically looking for those perfect sand shapes. You know, as a photographer, it's a little bit a different process than a painter. Painter, you do a lot of work in advance and then things happen. But actually, it's very similar, because in my head, I had, this is the vision. I want to get the dunes. I want to get the sand. And when I got there, of course, this is very pretty and I really liked it, but I really fell in love with images that show kind of the moment, which made me think about what happened there before. So this is kind of also a black and white photo of the sand shapes. And here it lays the question is, what caused those shapes? What happened here? And there's no way for me to know because I wasn't there at that time, but there's the remnant imprinted in time and in the location of the sand of whoever or whatever or what thing that was there, that makes us, you know, aware of other things happening in the world while we're not there. So these are part of the desert shapes. There's a couple of additional images that have been sent to showcase on the screen. After doing some of these faraway trips, I realized that, you know, we live in California and I didn't really need to go very far to actually enjoy the same pleasure of very unique landscapes. So I did a short trip to Death Valley, and these are just some images that I took on the way to Death Valley, which basically showed the sand dunes and the landscapes. And the next image is on the same trip to Death Valley. I did fall in love with is the human interaction with nature. And in this case, obviously, the electrical poles and the destroyed billboards that you see along the way on the California drives, and that don't make any sense, but are so unique of California. So here, that's presented.
Tatiana, when you were in Death Valley, did you see the sailing stones?
I did see a lot of the famous area in Death Valley, Zabriskie Point, the colorful mountains, but I concentrated mostly into the desert shapes because that kind of fit the type of work that I was doing before.
Okay. Do all of you know what the sailing stones are? These are stones that seem to move, but there's no wind, there's no nothing, and all of a sudden it's like they've been documented, and nobody knows how they became what they became. It's really interesting. Do you see your photographs, or how do you see your photographs? Are they like in the 70s when people had earthworks and what was in this gallery was the experience, or do you see it as documentation?
For me, it's more the experience. I think if you were to ask a journalist or a National Geographic photographer if my images are documentation, they will probably say no. There's a slight manipulation with the tones and colors, which National Geographic, for example, is pretty adamant about being true to whatever you see in front of the camera. So they're definitely interpretation, and my work has never been like flashy, bright, and colorful. So there's definitely the mood is being portrayed with the colors and the desaturation or the removing some of the tones out of the image.
It's beautiful work. It's beautiful work. I mean, it's the ocean and the desert, so we're very happy. Is there anything else that you like to photograph?
I'm going to continue doing some landscape photography, and in California. I have done a trip to Japan where I photographed additional landscapes. It was mostly rocks and water because of the whole coastline formations. Very moody, very dark. They don't get the same attention that the beautiful sand dunes and icebergs get.
Where can I just ask where did you stay when you were in Antarctica?
So in Antarctica, I actually took the National Geographic boat, which is an option for anybody who's interested in learning about Antarctica. They bring a lot of scientists on board. They have photographers, they have scuba divers. You get to actually visit some of the American bases that are doing research in Antarctica and meet some of the scientists. So it's definitely a very informative trip, and it's also beautiful to learn from other photographers that could be on the boat for National Geographic doing other type of work.
Yeah, I think it was Carl Andre who said that art makes one travel, and you certainly are the definition of that. These are remarkable. They're absolutely remarkable. Is there any questions? Oh, actually, I have another question. How did this start? Like, how did you figure out that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, it's very interesting. I always had an interest in photography, and as a kid, I bought one of those learn photography book, and I opened it, and it was like information about f-stops and other things, and I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna understand this." And then one day, I was sitting with a friend who's a cinematographer, and he had one of those manual Canon cameras, and literally in like 5 minutes, he showed me how everything worked and the relationship between one item and the other, and it was like a light bulb in my head. It's like, oh my god, not only I got it, but got it very quickly, and I bought exactly the same camera, and then I decided to start shooting around LA, and that's kind of how the whole thing started.
That's great. That's great. Do you still use a camera and film, or are you doing digital? Or
I'm all digital these days. There's definitely a resurgence of film, and I'm interested in it because I used to shoot film, and I'm very familiar with all the processes and even the film manipulation. So I'm definitely interested in going back to that. But there is the beauty of digital is quite amazing. And these days I have actually taken photographs with my iPhone that have been shown in galleries. So it is about how you photograph, not that much about what you photograph with.
Right. All right. No, I agree. Well, does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Hi, Tatiana, it's Gay Summer.
Hi, Gay.
Hi. The work is stunningly beautiful. I am particularly drawn to the icebergs. My question for you is, do you title these icebergs? Do you have title?
Yeah, so the way I've titled the iceberg has actually been by the location they were photographed in. And that could be kind of like, if somebody were to put a zip code or an address or a date on the photo on the artwork. When you paint, a lot of artists like to put the type of work, and they put the month they made it and the year as a souvenir. For me, I know exactly when I took these photographs. So for me, is really about the location that we're taken in. So the name of the photographs are usually the location and they're numbered sequential on the work. There's only one photograph. Actually, that's wrong. When I took photographs of the penguins, some of the photographs didn't have location. They actually had the experience that the image produced. So I have we don't have them for this show, but I have an image of a bunch of penguins that taken over an abandoned Argentinian base. And most people, when they look at the photograph from far away, they never think it's penguins. They think it's people at the base. And then I ask everybody to get closer and they see that it's penguins. So that piece, for example, is called Taking Over. I have a series of photographs of like two penguins with sky background and the snow, and they're looking at each other, and I call that conversation. So I have put more funny titles to images that have penguins, but the icebergs are all named after its location.
So in a sense, it's sort of what I said at the very beginning, that it's like these become about place. I mean, it really is about place, you know, and sort of what our higher angels think about that, I think. And that's great. That's so interesting. It's so interesting.
Definitely links space and time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. You know, you're not going to see this again. There could be hundreds and thousands of people going to Antarctica in the history of travels, and that shape, that's it. We're never going to see it again.
Yeah, wait, so much to think about.
There's a question from the chat. If you shoot in Hawaii ever?
I haven't shot as much as I want to. I have shot bamboo forest, and I've shot water, and obviously the beautiful sunsets that we get here. But you know, I need to get out of my bubble and get back to work, basically. And I really appreciate you guys putting this together to get us all motivated and back into action.
It sounds like for most of you that COVID, the lockdown, has actually made you very productive. Has made a lot of you so productive in your work, which, you know, is truly the only upside I can think about. And it's good. What do all of you, do you have can you talk to that? Any of you?
Well,
I would speak to it. I would just say that even though I consider myself a full-time artist, that I still am, you know, a community member. I'm a member of Rotary Club, or I volunteer. Our family has a theater, so we would have rehearsals at night, and you spread yourself thin or you multitask. So even though I could say I'm a full-time artist, I wouldn't devote all my time. And so having that forced time, especially because my studio is at home, was great. Plus doing some online workshops, I got time to study more other artists. So, I mean, I was even studying some of you on Instagram when I found out who you were going to be a month ago. But really connecting with other artists and watching some of their work, more time studying them, was really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I feel so bad, Gay, because you said that we weren't allowed to go to the beach, and I was a rebel. I was breaking the rules, and yeah. I mean, and my boyfriend and I were going to the mountains. I mean, there weren't any people there, so, but we would drive up to Carpinteria, and I just felt kind of like, if this is it, man, if this is the end of time, like, I'm gonna be at the beach, like, and I don't know, it felt really, it wasn't as inspiring as it is when, you know, everyone's well and people aren't sick, but it did feel like in that moment, yeah, I could do anything. Like I could write a novel, or I mean, there was this sense of like, this is the end. Unfortunately, it's, yeah.
Normally I'm a rebel, but they had $1,000 fine and you'd get arrested. if you went to the beach.
Well, we found some
Well,
beaches. We found some beaches that they didn't. We just drove far. They didn't have any fines, and it was just like old surfers. Like everybody was spread out, just kind of like everybody was just taking it easy. But yeah, down here it was definitely illegal. So.
Arizona didn't really ever close down completely because golf courses were still open and parks were still open. So there was never that feeling of, you can't do this. I mean, so that's interesting. I can't imagine what that would feel like. It's the ocean. How can you not go to the ocean? Big. So, yeah.
I had a question for Diane. Since you're in New York City, what kind of closed down, what was this COVID time like for you, painting wise or life wise? How did it change for you?
Well, for the first few weeks of the lockdown, I was just in the apartment practically. We knew it was coming, and we did shop and buy a lot of stuff, and we really locked down for a few weeks. When I emerged from the apartment after that, the streets were empty, like where there's usually traffic and bustling and people everywhere. There was nobody, there was no traffic, there was nothing. You could hear a pin drop. Usually in New York, there's street noise and sirens and, trucks, and it's just a constant hum all the time. There was nothing, it was silent. So on a level, you could enjoy that silence as, it's such a strange kind of peace, but on the other hand, it was quite concerning. And then when I would leave the apartment, my heart would pound. My studio is just a few blocks away, and so when it became appropriate, I could go to my studio and back home. Studio and back home. That was it. So I got really creative and I got really intense, and I would go every day to my studio for hours. And it was quite fruitful for me. It was a real release, and I was so grateful. Every day I would go and I was, I'm so grateful I have this studio. So thanks for asking.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, everything's open in New York now, more or less.
More or less. The restaurants really aren't completely open yet. So many of them set up outside cafes in the street, in the lanes, and they try to build barriers and put up tents and, structure it so people could feel comfortable. But I just shake my head and say, boy, New Yorkers love to eat out.
They do.
We do.
Oh my God.
Well, I actually have a question for Tatiana. My name is Maggie. I'm actually in Florida right now visiting family. My question, Tatiana, you made a really good point. First of all, your photographs are beautiful, but you said how if you were to photograph the icebergs again, they would never look the same, just with erosion and global warming, that kind of stuff. Would you ever consider going back and filming those same icebergs again so that we could kind of see the difference?
Thank you, Maggie, for your question. I would love to go back to Antarctica. It is, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I would love to go back to Antarctica. It's a process. It's a difficult trip, not a very comfortable trip. We went from the southern tip of Argentina, Ushuaia, got on the boat for National Geographic, and we crossed for 2.5 days the Drake Passage. And the Drake Passage is one of the roughest seas in the world. When we were going, the captain said, hey, we're very lucky you are doing the Drake Lake and not the Wake. And the boat was moving a crazy amount. And I can only imagine what it would look like if the Drake Passage was rougher than when I took it. The week after, the next boat that went out, after we deboarded the boat went back the next day to to the same locations in Antarctica to do the same trip. And they encountered the Drake quake, and the captain windows broke, and the boat had to turn around after one day into the Drake Passage. So there's always that fear that it's going to get worse. That I was very lucky, and I had very good weather crossing, and I had snow and gray skies, and there's always the chance that I go in Antarctica and I get blue skies, and I can't get these same moody images that I got. Obviously, no iceberg is going to be the same, so it will be great to be able to go down there and photograph more icebergs to add to my portrait of iceberg collection, and see what happens. And all you can do is, go with a goal and a mission, and then adapt with whatever happens, which is exactly what happened after the first trip, with me wanting to see penguins and falling in love with icebergs. So the opportunity will be great. Yes.
Gotcha.
I don't know how I feel these days about going on a boat with a bunch of other people though, but otherwise, yes.
Gotcha. Well, they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful.
Let's see, where is
I'm here.
Hi. I think it's so great to have talked to all these artists. This is just
Absolutely.
wow. I really do feel like my head's going to explode. It's just been so amazing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like to keep art going. If we're in the online modality where we're connecting, then art can exist there as well. So we're trying to do a lot of events like this to.
It's very hopeful. I will tell you that it is very hopeful. Considering the state of the art world today, it's very hopeful. So, yay for all of you guys.
Thank you for having us, and thank you to everybody who tuned
Thank
in.
you.
Thank you for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.